The Public Servants Association has recently called for Basic Education Minister Angie Motshekga to close schools before more pupils contract COVID-19. I'm now joined via Skype by the Public Servants Association's National Manager and Spokesperson, Claude Naicker. Mr. Naicker, a very good evening to you. Thanks for joining us and a warm welcome to the Globe.
Good evening to you.
We've seen just a short while ago Basic Education Minister Angie Motshekga so confidently saying that the department is ready for more pupils to return to school. What is the PSA's position on this?
Yeah, from the onset, the PSA was never in favor of schools opening. And if you listen carefully to the MECs of the province, everybody or some of them have indicated, listen, we are in the process of procuring PPE. We are in the process of installing water tanks. There's a clear indication that they do have a plan, but this plan is not in place. In other words, these water tanks are not in place. Sanitation facilities are not in place. One MEC indicated that they are busy delivering PPEs today. Schools are opening tomorrow. There's no guarantee that those PPEs will be right there when schools or when these kids enter the gate tomorrow itself. There's a clear indication from a number of MECs that they will be not admitting grade R tomorrow. Clearly indicates that they're not ready. Cool.
What the PSA is not telling us in clearer terms is whether the schools should be closed indefinitely and leading to the cancellation of the 2020 academic year.
No, we never indicated at all that the school calendar must be postponed indefinitely for the rest of the year. What we indicated is as soon as the country on the whole has got a hang of this pandemic, then we should reconsider opening schools at a later stage, perhaps in October, where it is warmer climate, and I think it's safer for kids to actually return to schools. It'll give schools sufficient time to have all the necessary plans implemented, water and sanitation facilities in place, necessary PPEs in place, and I think we will all be ready, systems go at that stage itself.
Well, the argument here, Mr. Naicker, is that as long as the government takes all the necessary precautions and intensifies all those precautions, making sure that all the millions of learners are protected against this virus. So it suffices to mention then that, why wait for the virus to normalize, or why wait for the flattening of the curve? For instance, you gave the example of October.
Well, look, it's not just PPEs that we are talking. We're just not talking about sanitation facilities. Earlier today, we heard that a number of teachers with underlying conditions would not be returning to school. So the indication was that these teachers will be replaced by temporary teachers. I haven't heard today that these temporary teachers are in place. Earlier in your news broadcast, my colleagues from other unions indicated there was an agreement in place for temporary teachers to be in place. But this has not happened so. So what happens to those classrooms that do not have teachers itself? The department surely has not got a plan in place or has not implemented this plan to have temporary. Those are one of the problems. What's going to happen to the existing educators? Are they going to be taking on the extra burden itself? Surely they'll be exhausted by the end of the days, and we probably have more teachers perhaps being burnt out and staying at home. So we're faced with a further crisis, I think it is.
You know, the quality of education that is being constantly disrupted could be impacted, no doubt about that. So what does this mean for the level and quality of education in South Africa moving forward?
Well, look, we have a very high quality of education in South Africa. And I think a lot of our practices and our theories are based from overseas experience. I think this cannot fit into our scenario here in South Africa. It's okay to base your experience on a school that has 10 or 15 learners, but in reality in South Africa, we don't have that. We're coming from a background where we had a lot of problems itself, and we're trying to get to grips with that. We have classrooms with 35 learners itself. So surely we cannot base our experience on overseas experience itself. All we are saying as the PSA is that, yes, if we have all these places, we have all these safety protocols in place, surely we'll be in favor of the schools reopening. We can deliver better quality education without having the fear of being infected itself. A lot has been said that transmission of this virus among kids is non-existent. But you must remember that these schools are community-based schools, and the infection rate in community is increasing by the day. Surely this is going to pose a problem for kids that are going to go to schools. Yes, schools are not considered the epicenter of this virus itself, but they come from homes where adults are prone to getting this virus. Surely them going to school is going to infect other kids. So this must be seriously thought about before we reopen schools, I think, especially for the younger ones.
And just picking up on that point, Mr. Naika, some voices insist that children are at a much lower risk of suffering COVID-19 symptoms, so school must reopen immediately. What do you make of that?
Schools will reopen. Unfortunately, the department is forging ahead, be it whether there's resistance from communities, from the unions at large, from governing body associations. I think what we need to do, we need to insist, we need to monitor that our members, teachers, and learners alike are protected. We need to be extremely vigilant to ensure that all safety precautions are adhered to before people enter the schools, I think.
Well, I guess the basis of my question is that since we don't necessarily are privy to the information with regards to the rationale that the government has applied in the reopening of more schools. So the issue here, Mr. Naika, is that since some voices are insisting that children are at a lower risk of infection, could have given rise to this rationale for sending them back to school.
Yes, certainly. That is the only rationale that they're using itself. I think there's other factors that you need to take into account. As I indicated, the human resources factor, where there'll be shortage of teachers itself because a number of teachers have underlying conditions would be not reporting for schools. I think this is the key factor that you also need to take into account. Yes, the rate of infection is not high among kids itself. And as I indicated, these are community-based schools. And there's a likelihood that adults from where these kids come from, homes from where these kids come from, these infection rates are going to be quite high. Don't you think so?
All right, just before I let you go, Mr. Naika, do you want to give us, or rather keep us up to speed with regards to the progress made between the public servants and the government about the salary increase issue? Where are you in that regard?
Well, as late or as early as February, rather, we launched a labor court application because, as you're aware, that government is not implementing the salary increases for public servants, which was due to them on 1st of April this year. The government has reneged on a 3-year agreement. This is the 3rd year of that agreement where they were due for a salary increases. They've cited that there's lack of funds and they're unable to meet the obligations in terms of this agreement. So we have launched a labor court application to enforce that agreement. And when court did resume normal operations, we had filed papers or we had submitted papers on the various parties. As late as last week, one of the parties have indicated that they needed more time to file opposing papers, which we found was absolutely ridiculous because we had notified them as early as February that we'd be launching this application, and they should have been prepared. But reluctantly, we have agreed for an extension of time for them to file their opposing papers until the 17th of July. Once that is done, we'll have to wait for a court date. And we're confident that the Labour Court will rule in our favor so that public servants who are at the forefront of this pandemic that is risking their lives every day will get the salary increases that is due to them.
Are you not at all sympathetic with the government's position with regards to dealing with coronavirus, which is a pandemic that caught everybody totally by surprise, and the government did not have the necessary resources and the time to prepare for it?
Yes, we are sympathetic, but I think what must be taken into account is that unions were never in favor of a 3-year agreement. We wanted to negotiate on a year-to-year salary increases. It was the government that insisted that they wanted a 3-year salary agreement. So what are the factors or what are the benefits of signing a 3-year agreement? Is that you project your expenditure, you budget for your expenditure well in advance. So they should have budgeted for this expenditure last year so that they could pay public servants this year. And you must remember that the government was citing lack of funds well before the pandemic hit our shores itself. So it was way last year they had decided, listen, that they don't have funds to actually pay salary increases. I think one of the things that we've been mooting to as well, with the increased rate of corruption, maladministration, the funding of the SOEs, none of those funds have been recovered as yet. If those funds were recovered timeously, surely government would have been in a better position to budget and perhaps pay salary increases for these public servants, I think.
I suppose then that this pandemic sort of cancels out or nullifies whatever agreement that were put in place, whatever policies with regards to the issues of public servant salaries. But then, because you know that the government has already channeled some resources towards containment measures of the coronavirus. And for instance, there is this stimulus package that public servants and all South Africans, or rather, and some South Africans are going to pay for. It's not like it's a gift from government. They have to pay for it.
Yes, sure. As I said, that did not come out clear in their sort of defense to say, listen here, that the pandemic is the cause of them actually not paying the salary increase. As I said early on, they had mooted the idea or indicated well in last year that they were not able to meet their obligations in terms of the salary increases. And we've been saying to them, listen, there are a number of areas which you should have taken remedial action in order to safeguard, in order to save funds so that you can pay salary increases. The salary increases that we are looking at is inflation plus 1%. It tends to amount to about 5.4% for majority of the public servants. And as I said itself, they should have taken heed of the warning lines at that stage and said to say, listen, we need to budget. These are the areas where the shortfalls we are in jeopardy here, and we need to take cognizance of this, and we need to recoup money so that we can pay public servants their salaries that is due to them.
Mr. Claude Naicker, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Welcome.
All right, that was the Public Servants Association's National Manager and Spokesperson, Claude Naicker, joining us via Skype. This is the Globe on SABC News. We'll have more news coming up after this break.